Welcome everyone to another episode of Representing the Resin. My name is Jameson Walborn, and today we're joined by my good friend Caitlin of High Fidelity Extracts. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm very excited about this one.
Me too. I'm really stoked to be here and get to share with yourself and everyone who pays attention.
Yeah. So you're one of the very few women in the Canadian solventless space, and getting to hang out with you at Grow Up and a few opportunities, like it's very apparent how deep into the resin you are, and how much you truly do care. And so before we get into all the projects you're working on, High Fidelity, the story behind that, and your transition into the legal space, I want to take it back and learn a little bit more about Caitlin. So where did you grow up? Where were you born?
Excuse me. I was born in a little town outside of Montreal, lived there for a couple of years, moved to Ontario for a couple of years, moved to New Brunswick for a couple of years, and then moved to Alberta when I was 8, I think. And then I grew up in Alberta since then until I was an adult. And then as an adult, I moved around a bajillion times on my own. So I don't know where I'm from. Alberta, I guess.
Where in Alberta?
St. Albert.
St. Albert. Wow. Okay. What did that? Was it one of your parents' occupations that had you moving around, or was it just the way it went? Or
my dad worked for the railroad, and so they moved him every couple of years and moved him. And then when we landed in Alberta, it was a 2-year job, and that I think was 4 or 5 years we were there. And he was headhunted by another company, the other railroad. There's only so many, and then we just stayed. And then when I grew up, I was like, I'm gonna go explore. So it's good.
So what was cannabis? When did you become aware of cannabis in your childhood? Was it early on?
I think I sort of always was curious as a kid. They teach you in school all the dangerous drugs and all the things that are going to happen. But I was always sort of it sounds interesting. And then I was really socially awkward. And I think cannabis was an avenue for me to connect with people when I didn't really know how to talk to my friends. Yeah. Right. So we could all just sit down and blaze. And then it didn't really matter if I was quiet in the corner because we all just smoked a joint together and we're all friends on that level. And it worked out well. Yeah. And then so I used that as a tool to connect with other people. Because if you smoke weed and I smoke weed, we can just sit together and smoke weed and then we're friends. Right.
Yeah, no, there's that love and understanding.
Yeah.
When you go to one of the sessions that, you or I go to these days and you look around, you're like, these people would not be friends if it
no, cannabis, right? It's absolutely.
So what do you remember your first experiences smoking cannabis? Was it a profound moment where
I think the first time that I smoked cannabis, I was so worried about what the people around me thought that I just was I don't know what to do here. So I just joined the group, and then I was oh, this is easy. And then it made it sort of hanging out with those people easy, and it made hanging out with more people easy. And I have probably been consuming cannabis ever since.
Wow. So it was immediate for you. It was
yeah.
Works. This helps with social anxiety for me. This helps me fit in and feel a part. And so and what age?
I was 16, I think, when I started smoking, maybe 15. Yeah. So it was a long time. Somebody made a comment to me one time that when they consume cannabis, it turns off all the extra noise. And I really sort of related to that feeling. Sometimes when I'm not smoking cannabis, there's just all the input. It's just so much noise and I can't see through it. And then you can have a hoot and it just turns off all the noise and I can focus where I need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I find the same way. I get to a certain point in my morning where if I haven't smoked already, I'm oh man, I just need to stop right now, smoke, and go back to doing what I'm doing. So
that's right. Get back on track a little.
So what coming out of St. Albert, and what was your relationship with the plant? Were you just always buying from a local plug? Were you starting to distribute yourself? Were you growing it? How'd your relationship develop?
So I think when I first started smoking cannabis, it was always through friends of friends, and this guy can grab it, this guy can grab it. And then it wasn't really until I actually got together with my partner, who I'm currently with now. We were 20, 21, and he he was very big on having multiple flavors of cannabis. And that's really what opened my eyes to the fact that it's more than just like grab a bag of cannabis. There's all these nuances and varieties and flavors and different things to it. And that was really where my eyes were open to like all of the extra impressive things that this plant can do for us. But I think prior to that, I didn't really notice the variety to that extent. It just was like, oh, here's another bag. And it was different, but I didn't really put the thought into it. And then we came together and I was like, oh, I get it. Like when you have 4 different flavors at home and you can try those 4 different flavors together, that's when you really start to understand the differences and what works for you and what doesn't. But when you just have one bag and you just smoke through the one bag and then you smoke through the next bag and the next bag, you don't get to see those nuances, right?
Absolutely. No, it's not until you get exposed to those flavors that you can really appreciate them. So tell me, coming out of high school, what was your first move? Did you set a career path? Did you just kind of wander around freely? Like what was the
So I was a bit of a floater, like with no plan, because I don't plan and I just am like, do this now. And so I got together with my partner when we were 20. So right after high school, like we were kind of knew each other for a little while leading up to getting together. It was sort of a thing. And then I forget your question. I talked myself stoned.
No, that's totally okay. I just, what was your move after high school?
Oh, yes. Yes. Gotcha. So we got together and then we decided that we were going to make a really insane move. And in 2007, we hopped into an 89 Ford Escort and we drove to the East Coast. And we had no plan except that we were going to the East Coast. And then we had tickets to see Bob Dylan in Ottawa on July 5th. And we left Alberta on July 1st. So we had to cover that stretch in that time. Then we could see Bob Dylan. And then we took an 89 Ford Escort hatchback. So it was in 2007. So let's highlight the age of that car. So Don's dad said, if you guys get to Newfoundland, I'll give you $500. So we were 21 and stupid. And we're like, we can do it. As long as we get to Newfoundland, we can spend all of our money, get enough money and go home. So we just left. We left. And the funny part that sort of threads through this is like by then we were already heavy cannabis consumers. This trip was probably fueled by us providing cannabis to our friends, right? So we left and we took like Butter King butter, like back in the day, Butter King butter with us, but there wasn't rigs and there wasn't dab tools and there was no option for that. So we had like hookah coals that we would break into pieces and we put the hookah coal on the bottom of a pop can, like in our car and put like a dab on the hookah coal and hit it with like the top half of a pop bottle because what else do you do? And we made jokes and then we would like bury it in the ground so that we didn't start a fire. And we made jokes that like we had to really be careful not to burn down Newfoundland as we were dabbing hookah coals in our little car, packed full of basically everything we owned at that point in our life.
That's a great story. So did the car made it? Did the car make it?
The car made it. Well, that's debatable. So the car made it in that we changed the alternator at one point and that on the stretch home, so we changed the alternator at one point, then we had landed in Toronto for a while with my family. And on the stretch home from Toronto to Alberta, the e-brake light came on while we were driving. We're like, that's a little weird, right? So we were kind of nervous. And then as we went to like slow down on the next stop, is very apparent that our brakes were not functioning the way they were supposed to. And we were like, again, we were 21 and stupid. And we're like, we're going to make it home. And we drove all the way back to Edmonton. And then when we took the car in to get looked at, they were like, yeah, you had 2 brakes only because the brakes are connected. So if the front left goes out, the back right goes out. And so we drove all the way home, highway speeds in 2 brakes. And it was quite the ordeal.
Wow.
So the car made it, but like arguably, right?
Arguably, very arguably.
Yeah.
So
we were on the road for 12 weeks. We pushed that thing like to its limit. It was amazing.
So your partner at 20, was he just had the luck of knowing a lot of cultivators, or was he cultivating these different varietals himself?
No, he just had the luck of knowing all the right people. He had all the connections to all the varieties of people. And because he's always liked variety and he's always sort of like top end everything. So he had on purpose a handful of really quality connections so that he could make sure he maintained that variety.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so what happened once you got out to Newfoundland? Like what was the move then?
So it was good. We we just toured around to random places and random things and went randomly wherever we could go and just sort of pushed that through to the car. But I think we ended up going from our Bob Dylan concert in Ottawa straight to Newfoundland, like to the furthest eastern point we could get to. And then we slowly worked our way back. So we made it through like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. We went up to PEI. Our brakes were a little weird on the bridge. That was kind of a funny moment. That probably should have clued us in that something was going to go wrong, but it's fine. We toured all of PEI and then we made our way to Toronto. And I spent some time there with my family. All my family is from Toronto. Both my parents have siblings there. So we visited all of them and then made our way back to Alberta. I think we were 12 weeks on the road. Yeah, it was quite something.
And so what was the next move? Like once you came back from the trip, was there a job or
so
not really?
Then began like the random series of events that sort of led us to even where we are right now, because I can trace back so far, like because this happened, that happened. And because I was in this place, that happened. So I took a job with like a temp agency and we weren't sure where we were going to live. And I was just taking these random jobs. And I ended up taking a job in an office for like an autism society and did all this research to help them like redo their pamphlet. So I did all this research on autism. I was like, this is pretty fascinating. A series of random coincidences again landed us with an apartment in Red Deer, south of Edmonton. So we were going to move to Calgary. We debated Lethbridge, all these different things. This funny thing lined up. His mom was in Red Deer at the time. We saw this really cute apartment. She's like, come just check out the town. We saw this really cute apartment. We called the number outside the apartment. The guy's like, oh no, I don't have any rentals in the whole city. Oh, hang on a sec. Takes another call, comes back and says, oh, you're in luck. I have a 1-bedroom. If you want to clean this 1-bedroom, I'll take your time spent off your down deposit. You can move in as soon as you want. The guy just skipped on me. So we took that apartment and then I finished this job in Edmonton at the autism office, moved down to Red Deer, and like a handful of coincidences lined up again. And I ended up working in group homes with people with autism. And that just opened up a whole world of opportunities for me to take this professional avenue that had nothing to do with cannabis whatsoever for 13 years. And then after that, I had all my own cannabis things going on the side, but professionally, this is what I was doing. And then after that, like COVID came along and now I'm here where I am.
That's really cool. So you, for 13 years, you specialized in helping or working with people with varying stages of or degrees of autism.
And a variety of disabilities. So basically, children with developmental disabilities, all varieties of ways. And I ended up sort of focusing more on like speech pathology and communication skills and interacting with each other. Because if you, like a lot of kids with autism don't have words and they were not really sure why they don't have words, or they have words and they're not functional. But if you can't communicate with me, we got to find a way that we can communicate, because you're clearly thinking and you're clearly processing. So how do I connect with you so that you can let me know what you need so that we can work together? And I just like realizing that that's what I was doing again was just like a snowball effect that I was like, well, I have to keep doing this and helping these people. I had a handful of like really special moments when I worked in that very first group home that just sort of sealed the deal for me that like, this is what I need to do right now. And so I carried on that pathway as long as that pathway took me. And it was very special and it was a gift to me. As much as I got to help these people, that was a gift to me and my world and my experience. And I am forever grateful. And then now we're transitioning.
That's so cool. That's so cool. That work is really important. And it's cool to like think of you doing that in your prior life. Like I remember you telling me now, but I didn't really absorb it.
Yeah. It's huge.
I'm like, that's really neat. You're an all day smoker, right? So you're using it throughout your day. Like I find that I have a lot more time for kids and simple issues and things when I'm using cannabis and medicated. Like I think it helps.
Right?
Yeah.
Like have a dab and then go play with a bunch of kids that like interact with you in a really funky and unique way. Like that sounds so fun. That sounds so fun. I'll take it. And then on top of that, I got to experience the gift of teaching kids how to speak and or communicate with their families. And so there was a handful of times when I really facilitated like some of the first communication interactions between a child and a parent. And that is a phenomenal experience. Like to open the door for that is huge. Like in one of the situations, the parents picked the child up and cheered and passed him around the room from dad to mom to grandma to grandpa. And they cheered and clapped because he asked for milk. Like it sounds so basic, but it was so monumental that, oh my gosh, what an experience and what a gift for me to get to provide this to these families, right?
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's really something special.
So
I can go on and on and on and on about it.
the whole time you're working with these kids, at what point does your relationship start to get more serious with the plant?
So that's sort of a two-part question, I suppose, because I started that work in Red Deer when we lived in Alberta, and then on the backside of that, we learned how to produce our own BHO. So that was sort of an interesting experience. And then we moved to Vancouver, and we worked really closely with dispensaries at that time to help support them to provide that product to the people. So then we've really always been interacting with the cannabis and the resin and the production and the extraction. And through that, like, had a set of bubble bags, kind of played around, but always like the focus, I guess, was more, how do I make this the strongest possible thing for you? So we made like edibles and we made hash drinks that like knocked your socks off, because my focus was like that. Let's just make what we can to knock your socks off. And so that was a really interesting experience. And then through that, we got some really cool opportunities to work with some really interesting people. And then we sort of found out, then rosin became a thing, right? And so once we learned that we could make all the same products without all the risk and the chemicals, like automatic switch. And so from there, we started making beautiful rosin on our hair straightener, which was a really fun operation. So like my partner would put the nugget into the hair straightener and I would step on said hair straightener, and we would collect lots and lots and lots of rosin from our hair straightener. We went through lots of hair straighteners, as you might imagine, by standing on them, but like lots and lots and lots of flour went through those hair straighteners. So then that was like the automatic transition for me. And we sort of moved away from like a BHO product, even for consumption. That's sort of when my hash snobbiness really started to come out, because I can have all this without all these yucky things. Like, yes, please, I'll go that avenue. And then it wasn't really until COVID, to be honest, that we were home and we had an opportunity to produce bubble hash like with a friend. And so we ended up having the opportunity to sort of play around. That grew from a small operation in my garage to I moved to BC and built a lab. So that sort of happened very quickly, but I ended up connecting with a handful of friends that we all together were like, yeah, let's see what we can do with this product. So let's play around. And it just sort of developed into a larger full-time focus from there, because we were working from home. So I didn't have too much on my plate that I could spend the time like playing with the terps and playing with the resin and getting to experiment and getting to do all the cool things that resin does for us. And it really sort of blew up from there. So I think in a weird way, if it hadn't been for the opportunity that COVID presented us to be home and play, I don't know that we would be doing what we're doing currently. So that's really neat.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that. When I tried your resin during COVID, I would not have assumed you had just started making fresh frozen.
Well, so we had been, fresh frozen that was my first experience with fresh frozen. We had been making bubble hash for like a significant amount of time. It wasn't really until, I guess, shortly before that we sort of brought it together that we were like making rosin from bubble hash. I think it all sort of developed at the same time, like with the industry, but we were making bubble hash like in a bucket, stir the whole thing, like backbreaking. We've been doing that for a long time. And then when we moved out to the coast, that's when we got a freeze dryer, and that's when we stepped up all the pieces and we're like, game on.
Yeah, the freeze dryer is really the game changer. It's
big
like and the new chapter in your hash making career starts.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as soon as we brought that home, it was like a whole new level. And that's when I had an opportunity. So we worked sort of with a collective, and these growers had this excess product. The market was kind of changing, and they were like, well, let's all sort of play together, and maybe if we can make something that people would be stoked on, then we can roll with it. And so they just were like, here, I know you can make this product. Like, let's see what this grows into. And it sort of grew into something that people are quite stoked on. Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It really did. I mean, the product was incredible. I think the first thing I dabbed from you was the 3 papayas.
Oh, my favorite.
That was like, I was like, I need to find out who this person is. Like,
I take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was a real treat. Like you could tell there was real care and intention behind that. Like even how it was jarred. So big congratulations to that. So like coming through these years, always being kind of a heady individual, were you a part of the forums or were you part of Hash Church or anything like that? Like where were you getting your new information from? Was it all self-developed?
A lot of it was, and a lot of it is me just quietly paying attention in the background. So I like to just take in all the information. So I like to peruse like the background websites, like the weird blogs that people are posting and weird articles where someone's like, I can try this. And I sort of conglomerate all that info and like watched all the Hash Churches, maybe not all of them, but I've watched a significant amount of those videos. I've watched a lot, like, and I'm really good at pulling pieces from here and here and here and here and figuring out like, oh, that's what's happening in front of me. So let's roll with that. And I think a lot of it was me playing. Like I think I the opportunity that I got with these growers to play with their resin was a game changer.
Yeah,
right?
the ability to see the material, like that volume of material, and get experience and understand, absolutely is vital to like be able to excel somewhere quickly. You know, if you don't have the material to run through, then it's all just theory. So that's very cool. So okay, so when COVID hits and you start washing hash, what is the learning curve? Was it steep? Was it something where you said, oh, we've washed a lot of material before, this live stuff is pretty easy, or were there some bumps in the road as you were adjusting to working with live material?
It was a pretty easy adjustment. I think it was almost easier, to be honest. I prefer to work with a live material than dried material. So I found a few pieces of that process like a relief. So that was handy. And then the learning curve, it was an easy adjustment. So there was a bit in the beginning where like we made some really, I say we as the collective, like I made some really ugly rosin that I didn't even want to consume. I'm not putting forward to anybody. Like I'm a huge hash snob. So if I'm not okay with it, there's a good chance other people won't be okay with it. But that was like, it took some learning, but part of that is inputs, part of that is genetics, part of that is process. And between me and the producers that I was working with, we dialed in their process and my process. And I think that's really where we got what we got. Like the genetics that came through my lab were phenomenal. And I think that was a big part of what happened for us, which is great. And then once I started producing my own product, that was a whole nother level.
What were some of the biggest corrections that needed to be made in the early days? Like, were there any certain variables that stood out where it was like, oh, the harvest wasn't the post-harvest wasn't being done properly, and that was, we fixed this one thing and that made a big difference? Or
I don't know that I could pinpoint one thing per se. I guess there was one change of equipment that like once we made that adjustment, everything was a little different after that. So I think that was probably a big piece. And that was just a matter of like picking the right wash bags. So like a lot of people out there just go, oh, wash bags are all the same. I'm going to buy the cheapest Amazon wash bags, like Bubble Dude or whatever his name is. And like, if you want to be making quality, you got to get quality. So you get what you pay for. And especially with something so vital to the process, like your wash bags, it's worth it to put the extra in to get those quality wash bags. And I think that was a big game changer for us.
Oh yeah. I mean, the quality wash bags are incredibly important. So I think that anybody running those bubble bag dudes is for any length of time, for sure.
Right.
So having worked with a lot of dry material before, or cured or dried versus fresh frozen, have you encountered anything that you prefer dried and cured and then washed versus fresh frozen and then washed?
In terms of the final product or in terms of the production of my own?
Final product.
Oh, I don't know if it's really that noticeable of a difference. There's a few like tiny nuances that I think I could pick out because I've consumed like enormous amounts of this product. But I think to your average consumer, I don't know that you would really be able to say, oh, this is definitely dried, this is definitely live. Some nuances.
Yeah, that's right? Interesting. I would say there's a pretty big difference between cured material wash bin and fresh material?
Through the process, for sure. I don't know. I think those final products are close. But then again, I haven't done a lot of dried product for some time. So
yeah. I think that they're close until they cure out, and then there's like a dramatic color difference. But like you can
that's true. That's true.
Those sharp fruits, I really don't find like, the real true to the plant flavors. I find
way better for fresh.
Yeah.
Way better for fresh. Like if you really want to capture the true essence of that plant, you have to watch it fresh.
Yeah.
Or like live, right?
Of course. Well, yeah. I mean, live is fresh frozen. I mean, the live stuff is pretty wild. Have you ever experimented washing non-frozen plants?
I want to, but I haven't had that opportunity. Have you?
No, I've just heard about it. It sounds
wild.
It makes me nervous. But
yeah, me too.
I think it would be pretty cool. So, switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about fresh press versus cured rosin. What's your preference and why?
Oh, you have to cure rosin. Like there's no, if you want to capture the true essence of that plant.
Don't talk to me like I'm crazy. Like you know that there are people out there who could think completely differently. So you can't be like, what's this kind of question? Like
I think hands down, you got to cure your rosin. I think to capture the essence of that plant, you got to let those terpenes work together and express themselves before you enjoy it. It's just not the same. Hands down, you got to cure your rosin. I mean, like have a dab of fresh press and then you can be like, I hooted it. And then close that jar, give it some time and then come back. Also learn that the hard way. Like, let me tell you.
I think that it's, I mean, if you're hunting and selecting based off fresh press, then you want to present as fresh press or be sure that the resulting cold cure is good. But I feel as though strains that present well as fresh press are rare.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I just, and doing fresh press properly is hard. If you have those bubbles in it, you're going to have your fresh press oxidizing tremendously fast.
Yeah.
Because you have oxygen inside what you're trying to keep oxygen out of. So, I mean, it's rare. It's like 1 in 50. I'd say that I might prefer fresh press to. So yeah, I mean, for the vast majority, I couldn't agree more. It's very different markets, different people. The visual appeal of the fresh press, like we see in some markets, some people care more about what the weed looks like in the bag than what it actually smokes like. And
that's not it.
And so I think some of that rubs off on. Fresh press is a very beautiful looking thing and people like to receive it like that. But the whole argument of, oh, well, I let it cure out and then whip it up. I'm like, so you cure out 1 gram and you whip it up.
Right?
I mean, I don't think you're getting the same bath of terpene mixing that's going on in, a 50-gram jar.
Yeah, agreed. If you're just making teeny tiny like personal amounts, just smoke it, really.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, you're not going to get that much over like a huge weight. It'll change slightly, but it's not going to be that much over a huge weight. If you're making personal size amounts, just smoke it. I don't think you're going to have much. You're not going to lose out on much, right?
Yeah.
But I think also if you have the opportunity, let it sit.
100%. Has High Fidelity ever put out fresh press?
No.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Other than the 3 papayas, what has been like some of the standout cultivars for you? I know I had that Rainbow Driver that was really impressive of yours. What are the cultivars that you're currently running? So
the Rainbow Driver, I think, sort of took us to where we are because that Rainbow Driver is a crazy plant in itself. Like it's something special. So we were really excited when that came through quality. And then once I started growing for myself, which was also a game changer, that's when I started securing like a G6 jet fuel, not jet fuel gelato, the precursor to jet fuel gelato. We had a watermelon soda that was super fire. And then the other one was my brain is blank. I can see the plant. Oh, it was an iced out. It was spectacular. And for like an iced out, people are like, no, it was spectacular.
It's very cool. Yeah, I remember the watermelon for sure. What are your thoughts on melt? Are you pulling melt out? Are you pressing it? Like what is your opinion?
I personally love to consume like a full melt. That's a beautiful experience. Like on your nail, like in terms of actually being able to produce that, I have found that to be a challenge. So we've tried a handful of different ways, avenues, strategies, and I've not been able to necessarily pull out a full melt that I'm satisfied with. Like, would the average consumer like it? Probably, but I have not been super satisfied with my melt, so I just end up pressing it.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
that's fair. You're a
Yeah.
tough critic. You're a tough.
Yeah, oh, big time. But I did like try and chat with a few of my favorite producers of classic full melt and figure out what is it that you are doing different that versus what I'm doing. And I tried a handful of pieces, and it's a tricky one. So getting that quite right to the point where I'm happy with it has been a bit of a challenge.
Definitely. It's definitely like it's an art into itself for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, if you're a cultivator as well as a maker, are you noticing any difference working with salt grown material versus organically grown material?
Yes. Yes. It's hard to pinpoint necessarily what that difference is, but you can see it in the way the plant presents itself. You can see it in the way the plant washes, even in the way that it yields. Like the hash itself looks different from a living soil versus, or like an organic versus a salt in itself. So yeah, hard to pinpoint that nuance, but I do think there's a difference.
Is it something that as a consumer you feel like you can taste as well?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I don't know. What do you think?
I personally do. I mean, I think some people would love to call bullshit, and I would say let's do it. Like I feel as though there's a multi-dimensional flavor that can be recognized with organically grown hash that is less than multi-dimensional in salts. And I also feel like there's a salt taste unless done absolutely correctly. So
I'll have to watch for that.
I mean, some people will call me crazy, but until we prove otherwise, that's what I'm saying, and I'm sticking to it. But
No, I believe you. I feel like we are both on that same hash snob level. So if it's there, I'll look for it.
what have you worked with much outdoor material? I know we're in a bit we're going to talk about the legal Canadian space, but I know right now in the Canadian recreational market, you're pretty much relegated to sourcing outdoor material or depth grown material for a reasonably priced solventless offering. Is that something that you've looked at a lot or worked with a lot, as outdoor material?
I've done a lot of looking into and a lot of conversations with friends who've worked a lot of outdoor material. And I find if it's produced properly and it's really well cared for, you can almost get a more like robust profile from that terpene from an outdoor plant and the sun and everything that provides versus the indoor it's very regimented, right? So that profile is, I think, a bit limited. So there is some differences in terms of the actual experiencing production of outdoor versus indoor. I haven't had the luxury of working with like a high quality outdoor to say that difference myself. Some of the indoor that I've worked with or the outdoor, sorry, that I've worked with has been less than par. So I don't know that I can say that equates to what I've been working with in terms of the indoor. I'd really like to see some high quality outdoor. Like I know a friend of mine produced some high quality outdoor, and he washed it and he preferred the outdoor version of that plant to the indoor version. Same cut, they just put it outside. And you could see it in the hash. Like you could see it in the final product that there was more like nuances. There was more-ness there on that outdoor versus that indoor.
100%. Outdoor resin is incredible, and it'll sit you down a lot stronger than indoor. Like I've got some outdoor here, and it's got another level to it.
As long as it's done right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like your setup for washing, are you running a machine? Do you hand wash? What's your preference?
Depends on the size of your wash. Like I love a good hand wash, a good solid hand wash, paddle, bucket, ice, like that's going to produce you a high quality product. On scale, is that viable? That's debatable. So on scale, I think you have to go machine, right? But if I am making small pieces for myself, I'm going to just stir that bucket until I can't stir that bucket any longer, right? But in terms of like anything larger than that, I think machine is a smart way to go.
You had a chance to work with any of the machines, the icons, the Ospreys, the hashtags?
I've had the opportunity to see a hashtag demo. I've had the opportunity to work with the Delta VTS 50, and I had the opportunity to work with the Osprey.
And what, any observations from the Delta or the Osprey or the trial of the hashtag?
I've got some thoughts. I'm not sure how far they should go. I think I'm really excited for the Osprey, and I'm really excited for what I think it's going to do for the product that we are going to produce with it. So that's huge. The VTS had a few frustrating pieces to it. And I think there was a handful of design things that as I go through, like again, I've been doing this for a while, so I can see those kind of nuances that as I went through that, I'm like, well, why isn't it like this? Like, why isn't this simple piece? Like, why isn't the floor slope? Why doesn't it point to the drain? Like, right? So if you have to fight all your water down the drain, like it's little things, right?
100%. Are you?
Yeah, there's pieces on that.
When do you believe the most glands are being separated from their stalks in the wash? Like, are you a proponent of Frenchie's school of thought where there's a vortex happening and that vortex creates suction and the suction creates the separation from the head? Or are you more that the agitation or the counter, the reverse motion in the barrel creates that breaking point of the water smashing against each other?
I think it's a combination of both. Like, I think that vortex is critical, but I think that the vortex is a critical piece because that's where you're going to pull those heads off for sure. But then how you maintain those heads in the water is that tricky component. So you want that reverse to make sure that you're agitating so that you don't just get stuck in like one solid piece moving as a solid piece. So you do want that reversal, but I don't think you want it to crash. Like, to me, that piece needs to be slow. You want things to settle, turn it around and go the other way. Like that huge this way quick switch causes too much stress on the plant and stress on the stalks. And I think that's where you're going to have a lot of breakage and you're going to get a lot of chlorophyll.
Yeah. No, I think that's the right way to look at it. Like, if you are going to be turning, that you don't need to have that aggressive switch over, which is something like I used to do all the time. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that's where all right?
Yeah, we've all been there.
Absolutely. So there's been a rise in resin mixing. Is that something that you're a proponent of, taking a little bit of one cultivar and mixing it with another to create a final product, or are you more of a purist? I
live in both camps because I think there's something to be said to that pure straight through, like, here's the plant, here's what the grower produced, here's the hash from it, straightforward. But I also like the opportunity to mix in the right time and place, because then you can actually combine like terpenes and cannabinoid profiles that you don't get naturally. And so you have the option to experience more varieties and more experiences and more pieces to it when you put terpenes and profiles together that don't go together on their own. So I'm both. But I also think you got to mix that in the wash. I don't think it goes well when you mix that in the hash, or if you take two rosins and mix them together and be like, here it is, unless you're doing that like straight for your dab. Like, take two hits from one jar and then from the next jar and dab that. But I'm not super keen on like taking 2 jars of rosin and mixing that and saying, here's the thing. You got to mix it. I think you got to mix it in the wash.
Why? What makes you say that?
Because I find when you mix the hashes together at the hash stage, you still sort of see 2 different rosins when you press it. So if you wash it together, I think that's where you really get like the nice amalgamation of the terpenes and the heads together, and they mix more evenly through that process. I don't think I can manually mix them the same way.
Even in that, putting the loose resin into the bag, you don't find that a satisfactory mix?
Not necessarily.
No, it's a cool perspective. I was talking about this with somebody else the other day, and they were like, their camp was, you got to put the loose resin in the bag together and press it through the screen. You can't mix it after you've pressed it. And I thought it's just an interesting discussion to have with different makers to see where their head's at. So I think that's a really cool perspective. You are known for doing some really cool solventless diamonds.
Yes.
What got you into that? How did that start? And how was that to that learning curve?
So the learning curve was steep. Like, it was steep. So I like to sort of I really like to be innovative. And I have really sort of owned that I am one of the few, if not maybe the only female hash maker through this. And so I've really liked to differentiate myself as that and in any sort of way that I can. And when diamonds sort of came up as an exciting idea, I thought that could be like another really cool differentiator for me to see just what happens. And like I said before, I was working with that collective. And so I sort of had the opportunity to play with resin and not have to worry too much about losses and gains because we had the inputs. And so when I first started the process, there was like a 30% loss in the process, which is like tragic and heartbreaking because that is a significant amount of product to the point where you're like, I don't know if this is worth it. When I finalized and commercialized my product, I had less than 8% loss. So I really dialed that in, like playing and failing and playing and failing and modifying and growing to see sort of what it would take to get me to where I am with that product now. It was a steep learning curve.
Oh yeah, no, I can imagine. Was it, do you feel that when you have an incredible representation of a specific cultivar that you want to take it all the way to deconstruction into diamonds and sauce, or would you reserve that for like lots with slight issues or imperfections that you're trying to create a better outcome from?
You have to use a quality product. So like those, if there's a poor color, poor taste, what have you, it's going to translate into your sauce and your diamonds, and it's going to carry through that separation regardless. So you have to be using like a really quality product, a really nice smelling, a really good tasting product to go into it. Otherwise, it's going to get a little worse.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that because I think a lot of people I think sophisticated makers look at diamonds and sauce sometimes and think something's been hidden in there because the maker has taken it that far, and just hearing you say that and understanding that and letting people understand that you can't hide anything, in there. It highlights it. If the terps aren't good, then the terp fraction is going to be even worse.
It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Right. And like I tried some really unpleasant rosin just to see, just to know, does it work? Can we do this as a thing? It was not pretty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even once you've pulled those terps away, there was the argument that the THCA should be still fine because if you've taken those gross terps away, you still have that active THCA isolated, but it doesn't translate.
What do you find? Because that would be an assumption that I think I would make, that if you had a less than desirable plant that had THC in it, you could end up making THCA diamonds and then getting rid of the terpene profile and using that subsequently for something else. You would not recommend that? No,
I don't think so. Because even the diamonds themselves were, I'm going to use the word tainted, perhaps. The separation is not necessarily complete. So you still have some terpenes in there. You still have some flavor in there. You still sort of have the ness in that experience. And if it's not good to start, it's not good to finish.
I think that's awesome. Have you, I think that's awesome to touch on, because I think not a lot of people understand that, especially about, diamonds and sauce, or solventless diamonds and sauce. Have you done any experimenting with vape cartridges?
Yes, I think that some of the high fidelity vape cartridges were some of the first to find their way to the people, which is very exciting.
And so,
also, learning curve, steep.
There definitely, like, have you were you playing it all with agitating your product after you took it off the heat mat? Like, I know a lot of people these days are whipping their product up, getting all the bubbles to come out, and then letting it settle and put it into the cart, and it making it a lot easier for that settling out process. Is that something that you were ever experimenting with?
Yes, and I found it didn't work necessarily, because if you're still seeing that level of bubbles that you can't fill your cart, your material is not necessarily properly prepped. So you might have crashing in your cart, you might have solidifying in your cart. I think it's worth treating it until you have very little bubbling left, and then you have a smooth, easy transition from jar to cart.
And are you thinking that you're, like, to go that far, you're losing too much of as far as terpenes go, or that's not what you found?
You're gonna have some loss. You're gonna have some change in terpenes, but I think it's worthwhile for the experience, and I don't think the loss is significant. I think it's
so, like, I'm not a cart smoker, and it's so hard, even just like, and I want to talk about everything that relates to solventless, but it's just so hard for me because, like, I look at carts like you take a 5-course meal and you, like, put it in the blender with the drink, like the glass of wine or whatever, and you
just drink that. Like,
you just drink it, and you're like, oh well, and then you criticize it. You're like, well, you know what? It's not quite as good as if you just eat the meal. It's like,
it tastes the same.
Yeah, of course it's not as good.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a huge cart fan either. The motivation, I think, to do the carts was for the people. Like, I probably didn't consume very many of them, if any.
I mean,
right?
It's the fastest growing market segment in California is solventless vape carts. So, I mean, I think that's how we're going to grab people and pull them over.
That's going to be the entryway, right? That's going to be your ticket into the solventless market is a vape cart. Yeah. It's gentle, it's easy, it's not an aggressive torch.
And then one day it's not going to be enough. Or Friday night, you've been hitting it all week, and you know what? I want this, but stronger.
A little better, just a little better, right?
Yeah,
I think so too.
Interesting. So you got into washing, or you got into washing live fresh frozen material, like, right as COVID was happening. So that means that you watched legalization happen for some time before ultimately deciding to make your entry. What were your thoughts on, as a traditional market participant, what were your thoughts on Canadian legalization, and what were your expectations of what was coming, and then what was the actual reality?
Well, the expectation and hopes were high. Reality was a little less than that. Like, there was times after legalization that I felt more concerned, and paranoid might not be the right word, but more concerned to be consuming when and where I'm consuming than I ever was before legalization happened. Because it used to be that, like, oh guys, come on, you shouldn't smoke that in the park, like, move on. And now it's like, oh, legit, you can't smoke here, like, you're in trouble. Like, that's a different thing. So I had high hopes for community and culture and all of the expression that we're used to, but I'm not sure we're there yet. I still like to hope that we can get there, and that people like me moving from one side to the other side, bringing that culture over, will help with that conversion.
Yeah, it's been a tough time. So, you are almost ready to fully make the transition from legacy into the legal space.
We're there.
And you're basically there. You're breathing rarefied air as a small handful of individuals who can actually, claim that truthfully. How's the process been? What
it is slow and painful.
What advice, what learning experiences, what did you anticipate, and then what was your reality as far as this licensing process went? Like, I know this isn't your first attempt to bring high fidelity to market. I know you tried to work with a larger group prior to that. What was your experience there, as much or as little as you can tell?
So that was an interesting experience, because they said they wanted quality, but they wanted throughput. And so to focus on throughput was very challenging for me, because I am all about quality. And so if you want to go that route and just throughput, maybe connoisseur is not the right avenue to go with. So that was an interesting experience. And we tried to sort of work together both pieces and sort of make the best out of that situation. But I think on both sides, it was complicated. And I'm glad in the end it went the way it went. So that's okay. And then now we're working with this other company that I think is really going to help us get ourselves where we want to go. So that's super exciting. And that's been a long, slow process as well. So if I have advice for anybody out of all of this, it's have patience. Like, it's going to take time, and it's worth the time, but it is going to take time. And the other thing I should say for sure is that it is going to take probably more people than you realize, because there's so many more layers that you can't know that you don't know until you get there. And it's not until you're at a situation where you like have no clue how to face this, because you don't know what you don't know until you get there, and then you're scrambling to find people. So people in your back pocket is a handy thing to have if you're trying to make a transition such as this one. Oh God, there's a big bug. Sorry.
No worries. You've recently just moved, right?
Yeah, we did. We just moved to Nelson a week ago so that we can launch our brand out of a company at LP in Nelson. It's gonna be really exciting.
That's very cool. So basically you were approached, or you found this group that saw the value in your brand that you had built and offered you enticing terms to come in and work under their license and help you bring your brand to market?
Yeah, as my own entity, which is super exciting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and because you started working with them early on in their transition, we have a unique opportunity to work with them during their genetic amnesty, and we were able to get the Rainbow Driver and the Through Papaya into that legal system. So super stoked on that, to be able to come, like, soon you're going to be able to get Rainbow Driver High Fidelity in stores. Yes, please. Yes, please.
That's really cool. You know, getting to the point where you can, you know, legacy consumers can go to retail stores and get the same product by the same person in that store, I think is really cool. I was having a conversation with a group who will remain nameless, a large cultivator in the space. And, you know, they were asking me what genetics I had. And I said, what genetics are you looking for? And they said, we want genetics from that have names in the Canadian black market. And I said,
oh, that's awesome.
I said, how fucking interesting is that? I said, oh, how the tables have turned. You know what I mean? Like, we started out naming these things like Paradise, renaming, you know, Matanuska Thunderfuck to Paradise Sunset, and you know, like,
it's frustrating. Just call it what it is. Like,
now they're wanting to the black market strain. So I think it's funny how things have kind of come full circle. What's the origins of High Fidelity? Like, do you love that John Cusack movie, or is it just true to the definition High Fidelity? Like, what's the origin of the name?
So it's a funny story. We were toying around with, like, how do we represent ourselves in a way that's sort of true to who we are and like kind of cool. So we're toying around all these different things. And the day that we made the actual decision, my partner was wearing a shirt that had a toaster and a record in the toaster, and on the toaster it said High Fidelity, and we were like, that's pretty cool, let's try that.
That's really
cool. It stuck but like, it's so fitting. Like, we're such music people and we're such like hi-fi people that it really made sense to us to go in that direction, because it's true to us on so many levels.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's a great name. I love it.
Thank you.
I never, sometimes you hear makers' names and you have to get told them like 5, 6, 7, 10 times before they stick. And when this one stuck right away for me. So
I'm glad to hear that.
Thought it was great.
It took some time, but once we got it, we were like, ooh, this is cool. Let's do that.
So from somebody who has a deep knowledge of the Canadian framework, what is one or some of the most frustrating points for you as a maker wanting to deliver product to a consumer?
That's it. All of it. I would like to make it for you and give it to you as soon as I possibly can. And there's so many pieces that prevent that from happening that that I think is the most frustrating piece. Like, we want to be able to produce product. And I say we as like an industry-wide people. We want to be able to produce product, get it to a state we're happy with, and get it to the people at that time. And that's not always an option because of different administrative pieces and nuances and forms and things like that. Like, it gets really tricky, right? So if we had a bit more avenue to like make the product and get it to the people quicker, I think that would ease a lot of the frustration. Right?
Yeah, 100%. I think, if we could, privatizing the distribution path is probably going to happen and then be looked back on as something that should have been done a long time ago. But having a government run entity in the business cycle is insanity to me.
Yeah, I agree.
And, if I want to come in and I have all the money in the world, and I go and I say, okay, well, I'm going to make full melt and I'm going to sell it at a loss, and I'm going to pay to put fridges and educational people in every single retail store across Canada, I legally can't do that.
Yeah, it's insane, right?
That doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
And like, if I go to the liquor store because I have to buy a bottle of wine for somebody or something like that, people are offering me drinks in the liquor store.
Right, at the liquor store. And Health Canada is not standing over your shoulder at the liquor store being like, 1 bottle of wine too many, my friend. Like, come on.
I mean, it's frustrating for sure. So I wanted to say, like, I wanted to ask, like, how long do you think the Canadian cannabis industry is going to be here, like, suffering? Do you see a quick turnaround? Do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Or do you feel like we still have more struggle ahead of us before things get better?
I think there's going to be a bit more struggle before things get better, but I do have hopes that we are coming to the end of that struggle. I'm not necessarily basing that on anything except for like, please, we need to get through this. But I think the issues are really starting to come to light to a point where they won't be ignorable any further. So hopefully we get some adjustments soon. Like, the excise program in itself is insane. Like, that can pull products off the shelf because the excise is so high and expensive, but I can walk in and buy all the beer I want and not, like, it's not a thing. Like, yeah, we need some reform, but I don't know that the people that need to do it are ready. But I think all those issues are coming to light and it's going to have to be faced soon.
100%. It's I don't think it's a functional system to a point where we can, you can only feed off a living body, right?
Yeah.
Like, you gotta let us do business to be able to take your pound of flesh.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, with your new partnership and your plans to go into the market, are they cultivating and then you're processing, or how's that working?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So they're cultivating what we want, and then we're working together to get cultivation and then processing done. Super exciting. So vertically integrated.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're gonna probably look at both pathways to do in-house product and then also to source product from other makers, so that we have sort of two avenues, like a really high-end indoor avenue and then a bit more of a price-friendly, still high-quality, hand-selected line to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's finding those right cultivators in those right areas in Canada. There are, I was interviewing Professor Sift the other day, and he doesn't disclose whether it was sun-grown, depths, or indoor, because he says, listen, it's top tier, and it's top tier, and I don't want you judging it because you think sun-grown's not as good as indoor. If I say that this is the best, it's because I sourced it. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think that's a lot easier to justify in resin than it is in actual flower. I think it's always hard when, like, I'm in California and I spend $70 on a blue bag of something, and it's like, you're like, oh, this was actually like this was a summer dep. You're like, oh, I might not have spent $70 on something.
Yeah.
So
we also might have missed out on something you'd enjoy if you picked it that way. Right?
Oh yeah, no, and it could be the best stuff ever, but I think it's easier to preserve and not judge when you're dealing with just the resin versus the resin and the flour together. So I think that's where we'll see like the education take place, where it's like, wow, these sun-grown terps, like I didn't realize these were sun-grown. They were just the strongest, hardest hitting. And then I found out they were sun-grown, and now I'm, the proof is in the pudding. So
you're onto it, right?
I think that's really cool. So when should we expect to see High Fidelity in stores? Is that, is there a timeline, or still things in the works? Or
at this stage, all I can say is stay tuned.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I don't like, I'm the under promise, over deliver type guy. It just appear in stores, then me call it and it not be ready for another year. So
yeah.
We understand.
It certainly won't be that long though. So we're good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. How, what, if there was one lesson in your hash making career, or your business career that you would wish you learned earlier, that you would want to share with people following in your footsteps, does anything come to mind?
Take your time. Take your time with everything. Take your time to learn the terps. Take your time to learn your genetics. Take the time to learn your process. Take your time to figure out all those little pieces and just go slow through it. If you rush any part of this, if you rush your production, if you rush your drying, if you rush your path to get to the market, you're going to miss pieces, and it's not going to be the quality that it could be if you take your time.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's sound advice. And, a lot of this industry is hurry up. You're missing the boat's leaving every minute, oh, the plants aren't growing, or you haven't flipped the flower yet. Oh my gosh. And,
give it the time it needs to get where it needs to go. And then you're going to have a much better outcome regardless of what you do. And that's true, like for cannabis and all cannabis production, but also life.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So is it the 3 papayas and the rainbow driver that we should expect coming to market for High Fidelity?
Yes.
Amazing. Yes, I think like a lot of people make the mistake of like bringing in a bunch of stuff and trying to put a bunch of stuff into rotation when like, get out there and nail something and do it well. And
then branch out, right?
And then branch out. Absolutely. So I'm very excited to support. I'm very excited to share the message. I know like Slurm's coming to market this year. You're coming to market. I think Kind's coming to market soon. Like the market's starting to seem more cultured, which is
exciting.
Hopefully, it stays that way and the brands stay independent as much as possible, and more independents come and that have been doing it for a long time, because there were a lot of entrepreneurs that got into it, but there weren't a lot of legacy brands or operators that got in early into the Canadian rec space. And that's just because of the way that we legalized. So I'm very excited to watch your progression over the next couple of years. I think it's going to be really exciting.
I hope so. I'm really excited to progress over the next couple of years with the industry and with the equipment and with all the things that I feel like are on their way. We're just on the forefront of figuring out this product. Like we don't know tons and tons and tons of things about rosin, and I'm excited to help unpack those pieces so we can learn what we don't know. There's so much here.
The machines we're going to be using in 10 years and the innovation. And
my gosh, right?
It's incredible. And the community that's being built. Like I'm really excited to hear you're coming down to Legends of Hash, and it's going to be a great time down there in LA. And you just get a lot of the same passionate people in a room, and good things happen. So very excited. Caitlin, thank you so much for coming on. Where's the best place for people to find you? Like where can people reach you?
People can find me right now on Instagram, High Fidelity Solventless, all one word.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Caitlin. I appreciate you coming on the show. And
thanks for having me. It was wonderful.
We're definitely going to have you on again.
I would love that.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Everybody have a great night. Thanks again.